Marcus Holloway's hand trembled as he stared at the email from the Judicial Ethics Committee. After 20 years on the bench, his career was hanging by a thread. The accusation had started with a simple flight to Chicago, a first-class seat he'd paid for with his own money, a white flight attendant who refused to believe him, and the humiliation that followed. The airline CEO had personally apologized yesterday. But tonight Marcus discovered something terrifying. The flight attendant's brother worked for the committee investigating him, and the evidence was being systematically erased. Would he be able to expose the truth before his reputation was destroyed forever? Before we begin this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from. If you believe in justice and fighting against discrimination, please hit that like button and subscribe to stay updated on more incredible true stories like this one. The truth needs to be heard. Marcus Holloway tightened his tie as he walked through the terminal at Atlanta International Airport. After 2 decades serving as a federal judge, he still carried himself with the same dignified presence that had earned him respect in courtrooms across the country. Today's trip to Chicago for the National Judicial Conference was routine. He made this journey twice a year. His rolling briefcase contained notes for the keynote speech he would deliver on equal justice under the law, a principle he had devoted his life to upholding. The boarding process went smoothly. Marcus handed his first-class ticket to the gate agent, who smiled and wished him a pleasant flight. He had splurged on the upgrade using his own frequent flyer miles, a small comfort for the long day ahead. Finding his seat at 2A, he stored his briefcase in the overhead compartment and settled in, opening his speech notes for one final review. "Excuse me," a sharp voice interrupted his concentration. Marcus looked up to see flight attendant Karen Mitchell standing over him, her expression skeptical. "I think you might be in the wrong seat." Marcus smiled politely. "No, this is 2A. I'm in the right place." He reached for his boarding pass to confirm. Karen's eyes narrowed as she looked from Marcus to his boarding pass and back again. "Let me see that," she said, taking the document from his hand. After studying it with exaggerated scrutiny, she asked, "How did you get a first-class ticket?" The question hung in the air. Several white passengers nearby had boarded without being questioned. Marcus maintained his composure, keenly aware that raising his voice would feed into harmful stereotypes. "I purchased it, just like everyone else," he replied evenly. Karen handed back his boarding pass with visible reluctance. "Well, sometimes people try to upgrade themselves without paying," she said loudly enough for other passengers to hear. "I'm just doing my job." She moved on to greet other first-class passengers, her demeanor instantly transforming into warm professionalism. "Good morning. Can I get you a pre-flight beverage?" she asked a white businessman across the aisle. Marcus couldn't help but notice she never returned to offer him the same courtesy. As boarding continued, the head flight attendant, Melissa, walked through for a final check. Karen immediately pulled her aside, gesturing toward Marcus. "Melissa, can you double-check this passenger's boarding pass? I'm not convinced he's supposed to be in first class." Melissa approached Marcus. "Sir, may I see your boarding pass again?" For the 3rd time, Marcus presented his ticket. The embarrassment burned, but he maintained his judicial composure. Melissa verified his information and nodded. "Yes, everything is correct here," she confirmed, but offered no apology for the repeated questioning. Throughout the 3-hour flight, Karen provided noticeably different service to Marcus compared to other first-class passengers. His request for coffee went forgotten twice. When the meal service began, he was served last, and his meal choice was no longer available. While collecting trash, Marcus overheard Karen whispering to another crew member, "These people always think they deserve special treatment. I've been flying this route for 15 years. I know when someone doesn't belong up here." Marcus pressed the call button to request water. 10 minutes passed before Karen responded with visible annoyance. "What can I help you with?" she asked, curtly. "I'd like some water, please," Marcus said. "We're preparing for landing." "You'll have to wait," she replied, despite the fact that landing preparations wouldn't begin for another 30 minutes. As passengers disembarked in Chicago, Marcus collected his briefcase and made his way toward the exit. As he passed the galley, Where the crew stood, he heard Karen's voice clearly. "Watch that one," she said to the other crew members. "He tried to scam an upgrade. I've seen it 100 times. They think the rules don't apply to them." Marcus paused, the injustice of the situation weighing heavily on him. For a moment he considered confronting her, but 20 years on the bench had taught him to choose his battles wisely. This wasn't over, but the conference deserved his full attention first. Little did he know, this incident was just the beginning of a coordinated attack that would threaten everything he had worked for. The Lakeside Hotel's grand ballroom was filled with judges from across the country when Marcus arrived at the National Judicial Conference. Despite the morning's humiliating experience, he was determined to focus on the important discussions ahead. His keynote speech on racial disparities in sentencing was scheduled for the afternoon session, and he had spent months compiling the research. During the morning panel on judicial ethics, Marcus noticed several colleagues giving him strange looks. Judge Richard Coleman, a circuit court judge from Virginia, seemed particularly cold when Marcus greeted him during the coffee break. "Quite an entrance you made, Holloway," Coleman remarked with a smirk. "I heard you had some trouble understanding airline seating arrangements." Marcus stared at him, puzzled. "I'm not sure what you mean." "Oh, don't worry about it. We all have our off days," Coleman said dismissively, walking away to join a group of predominantly white judges. Throughout the morning, Marcus felt increasingly isolated. Whispers ceased when he approached. Conversations shifted awkwardly. Something was happening, but he couldn't piece it together until lunch, when his clerk Jordan texted him. "Judge, you might want to see this." The text contained a link to a social media post from someone claiming to be a passenger on his flight. It described a belligerent passenger who had pulled the judge card when caught trying to sneak into first class. The post didn't name Marcus, but the details made it clear who was being referenced. By the time Marcus took the stage for his keynote address, the tension in the room was palpable. He delivered his carefully researched presentation on racial disparities in criminal sentencing, presenting data showing that black defendants received sentences nearly 20% longer than white defendants for similar crimes. During the question session, Judge Coleman stood up. "While these statistics are certainly provocative, I wonder if your personal experiences might be coloring your interpretation of the data. Objectivity is essential on the bench, after all." The implication was clear, and a murmur rippled through the audience. Marcus took a deep breath. "The data speaks for itself, Judge Coleman. These findings have been replicated in multiple studies across various jurisdictions. My analysis is based on methodologically sound research, not personal bias." "Perhaps," Coleman persisted, "but one could argue that judges who approach their role with a chip on their shoulder about perceived slights might be prone to seeing discrimination where there is merely coincidence or misunderstanding." The room grew uncomfortably quiet. Marcus maintained his composure. "The numbers don't have emotions, Judge Coleman. They simply reveal patterns that we, as guardians of justice, must address. If recognizing documented disparities constitutes having a chip on my shoulder, then I wear that chip proudly in service of equal justice under law." His response earned scattered applause, but Marcus could see the room was divided. As he stepped down from the podium, his phone vibrated with a text message from an unknown number. It contained a blurry photo of him speaking with the flight attendant on the plane, with the caption, "Is this appropriate judicial temperament?" Stunned, Marcus looked around the room, wondering who had sent it and how many others had received similar messages. The orchestrated nature of this attack was becoming clear, but its origin and purpose remained a mystery. Have you ever been in a situation where you were judged unfairly based on your appearance? Comment: justice matters if you believe everyone deserves to be treated with dignity regardless of their race. This story is just beginning to reveal how deep discrimination can go in our society. Hit that subscribe button if you want to see how Judge Holloway fights this coordinated attack on his reputation. What would you do if you were in Marcus's shoes? How would you respond to these escalating attacks on your character? And the bigger question, who is really behind this campaign to discredit a respected federal judge? Back in his hotel room that evening, Marcus loosened his tie and sank into the desk chair, physically and emotionally drained from the day's events. When he opened his laptop to review notes for tomorrow's session, a flood of notification alerts caught his attention. His professional social media accounts were overrun with comments and tags. With growing horror, Marcus discovered a video entitled Judge Causes Scene on Flight had gone viral, accumulating over 50,000 views in just 3 hours. The 30-second clip showed him speaking with Karen on the plane, but the editing was masterful in its deception. The footage began mid-conversation, making it appear that Marcus was raising his voice. It cut out Karen's questioning and jumped to Marcus saying, "I purchased it just like everyone else," which, without context, sounded defensive and aggressive. The video ended with a shot of other passengers looking uncomfortable, implying they were reacting to his behavior rather than to the discriminatory treatment he was receiving. Comment sections across platforms were flooded with racist remarks. Typical, they always play the victim. Just another angry black man who thinks rules don't apply. This is who's deciding court cases. Scary. Marcus's hands shook as he noticed. Several news aggregator sites had picked up the story with headlines like "Federal Judge Under Fire for Airline Incident" and "Judicial Misconduct at 30,000 Feet." When he attempted to post a brief statement clarifying what had actually occurred, the comments beneath it were even worse, accusing him of lying and covering up his behavior. His phone rang. It was his wife, Sarah. "Marcus, what's going on? I've gotten 3 calls from neighbors, and there's a news van parked at the end of our street." "What? Sarah, are you and Michael okay?" Their 16-year-old son had already faced racism at his predominantly white high school. This would only make things worse. "We're fine for now, but Michael's getting horrible messages. Someone shared our address in a comment thread, Marcus." Her voice trembled. "They're calling him horrible names, saying his father is a disgrace to the bench." Marcus felt physically ill. "Pack some things. Go to your sister's place tonight. Don't tell anyone where you're going." After ensuring his family's safety, Marcus began a methodical investigation into the video's origin. Using his judicial credentials, he convinced the social media platform to provide information about the account that first posted it. The account, TruthWatch USA, had been created just 2 days earlier and was linked to an anonymous email address. Further digging revealed TruthWatch USA was connected to the Judicial Integrity Project, a fringe group that had previously targeted minority and progressive judges with harassment campaigns. Their website featured articles claiming the judicial system has been infiltrated by activists pushing an anti-American agenda. Marcus's name now appeared on their watch list, alongside other black, Hispanic, and female judges who had made rulings they disagreed with. This wasn't random. The flight incident had been weaponized as part of a calculated attack. As dawn broke over Chicago, Marcus received an email from the chief judge of his district. "Marcus, we need to talk. The video situation has escalated. Call me immediately." The message contained a link to a national morning news program that had just aired a segment on the controversy, featuring an interview with a passenger who claimed to have witnessed Marcus being belligerent and pulling rank. The supposed witness was unidentifiable, their face blurred and voice altered. When Marcus called the chief judge, the conversation was brief and chilling. "The administrative office has received formal complaints about your conduct, Marcus. This isn't just social media noise anymore. The Judicial Ethics Committee is opening a preliminary inquiry." "Based on an edited video? This is absurd," Marcus protested. "I know, but procedure must be followed. Until this is resolved, they're suggesting you take a voluntary leave from the bench." Marcus felt the ground shifting beneath his feet. 20 years of exemplary service, thousands of fair rulings, mentoring dozens of young lawyers, all potentially undone by 30 seconds of manipulated video and a coordinated smear campaign. His phone buzzed with yet another alert. The Bar Association, where he was scheduled to speak next month, had just rescinded their invitation, citing recent controversies. 3 days later, Marcus returned to his chambers in Atlanta to find an official letter waiting on his desk. The gold seal of the Judicial Ethics Committee gleamed mockingly in the morning light as he broke it open. In light of serious allegations concerning conduct unbecoming a federal judge, The committee has voted to temporarily suspend Judge Marcus Holloway from active duty pending a full investigation. Marcus read the paragraph 3 times, searching for some indication that this was a mistake. The signature at the bottom stopped his breath. Judge Patricia Reynolds, his colleague of 15 years, and someone he had considered a friend and ally in the fight for judicial reform. His clerk Jordan knocked tentatively before entering. "Judge Holloway, I wasn't expecting you today." "Neither was I," Marcus replied, handing her the letter. "Apparently, I've been suspended." Jordan's eyes widened as she scanned the document. "This is outrageous! They can't do this based on that ridiculous video." "Apparently they can." Marcus moved to his computer, logging in to check his case docket. To his horror, all his cases had been reassigned. They didn't waste any time. "There's more," Jordan said hesitantly. "People are questioning your past rulings. Judge Reynolds has ordered a review of cases where you ruled against white defendants looking for patterns of bias." Marcus felt a cold anger building within him. How many cases? All of them. Going back 5 years. The systematic nature of the attack was becoming clearer. This wasn't just about one incident on a plane. It was about undermining his entire judicial record and everything he stood for. Marcus picked up his phone to call the committee chair, Judge William Harrington, only to be told by his secretary that the committee cannot discuss ongoing investigations with the subject. The wall of silence was immediate and complete. Later, that afternoon, Marcus met with his mentor, Judge Thomas Sullivan, an older white judge who had championed Marcus's career from the beginning. They sat in a quiet corner of a small cafe 3 miles from the courthouse, away from prying eyes. "This is unprecedented, Marcus," Thomas said, his voice low. "I tried to argue against the suspension in the executive session, but I was outvoted." "Who's driving this, Thomas? It can't just be about the video." Thomas hesitated. "There's been talk for months about your keynote at the national conference. Your statistics on racial sentencing disparities made some powerful people uncomfortable." "Facts shouldn't make judges uncomfortable," Marcus countered. "Perhaps not, but they do when those facts challenge the system we're part of." Thomas leaned. "My advice is to lay low. Issue an apology about the plane incident, say it was a misunderstanding, and this will blow over." Marcus couldn't believe what he was hearing. Apologize for what? Being black in first class? Having a flight attendant question my right to be there? Should I apologize for 20 years of ensuring equal justice too? Thomas raised his hands in surrender. "I'm just telling you how to navigate the politics. Fair or not, that's the reality." As they parted ways, Marcus felt more alone than ever. Even his allies were suggesting he compromise his integrity to save his career. Back at home, where Sarah and Michael had returned after the initial media frenzy subsided, Marcus spent hours researching every member of the ethics committee, looking for any connection to the airline or extremist groups. What he discovered at midnight sent a chill down his spine. Jeffrey Mitchell, an administrative assistant to the ethics committee with access to all case materials, shared the same unusual last name as the flight attendant. A deeper search confirmed his suspicion. Karen Mitchell was Jeffrey's sister. Suddenly, the coordinated nature of the attack made perfect sense. His formal complaint against the airline for discriminatory treatment hadn't just disappeared into corporate bureaucracy. It had been actively suppressed by someone with a personal stake in discrediting him. The conspiracy was larger and more intricate than he had imagined. This wasn't just about one racist incident. It was about silencing a powerful black voice in the judiciary. And someone had carefully orchestrated every step, from the confrontation on the plane to the ethics investigation that now threatened to end his career. As Marcus stared at Jeffrey Mitchell's staff photo on the judicial website, he realized this was just the beginning of a battle that would test every principle he stood for. The system he had faithfully served for 2 decades was now being weaponized against him. The morning after discovering Jeffrey Mitchell's connection to Karen, Marcus sat at his home office desk with a legal pad, methodically mapping out his strategy. 20 years of judicial experience had taught him that emotion without action was useless. If he wanted justice, he would need evidence, witnesses, and a strategic approach. "They want to use the system against me," he said to Sarah as she brought him coffee. "I'm going to use it right back." His first step was to gather witnesses from the flight. Using his contacts at the airline reservation system, a former clerk who now worked for the Department of Transportation helped him obtain a passenger manifest. Marcus spent hours calling passengers, explaining the situation, and asking if they would provide statements. "I'm sorry, Judge Holloway," said the 10th passenger he contacted. "I saw what happened and it was absolutely discriminatory, but I'm a partner at my firm, and we represent several clients who do business with that airline." "I understand," Marcus replied, trying to mask his disappointment. The pattern was becoming clear. People recognized the injustice, but feared retribution. On his 15th call, Marcus finally found someone willing to help. Dr. Alicia Chen, a neurosurgeon who had been seated across the aisle from him. "I recorded part of it on my phone," she said. "That flight attendant's behavior was appalling. I actually filed a complaint myself when we landed." "Did you ever hear back?" Marcus asked. "No, which struck me as odd since the airline usually responds to customer complaints within 48 hours. Marcus's next call was to Elijah Washington, his brilliant law school classmate who had built a reputation as one of the nation's top civil rights attorneys. "Marcus, I've been watching this nightmare unfold," Elijah said when they met at his office the next day. "The coordinated nature of the attack suggests resources and planning beyond just an angry flight attendant." "I know," Marcus agreed, sharing his discovery about Jeffrey Mitchell. "This goes beyond discrimination into active conspiracy." Elijah nodded grimly. "We need to fight this on multiple fronts. First, a formal discrimination complaint against the airline with documentation of the pattern of behavior. Second, an emergency motion to recuse anyone connected to Mitchell from your ethics investigation. Third, we need to find out who's backing this judicial integrity project." They submitted a detailed complaint to the airline's corporate headquarters, the Department of Transportation, and the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, complete with Dr. Chen's testimony and evidence of similar incidents reported by other minority passengers. The airline's response came with surprising speed but disappointing content. After a thorough internal investigation, Transcontinental Airlines has found no evidence of discriminatory behavior in this incident. "Our flight attendants are thoroughly trained in customer service and bias prevention. We suggest that Judge Holloway refrain from using his position to intimidate our staff when traveling." "They're doubling down," Marcus said in disbelief, reading the response to Elijah. "They're actually claiming I tried to use my position to get special treatment." "This is a common tactic," Elijah explained. "Flip the narrative, make the victim the aggressor. But something's off about how quickly they're moving to shut this down." As they strategized their next move, Marcus's cell phone buzzed with a notification from his home security system. Opening the app, he saw images of a man in a dark jacket photographing his house from the street. When he zoomed in on the figure's face, Marcus didn't recognize him. But the deliberate way the man documented each angle of his home sent a clear message. "We're watching you." That evening, after ensuring Sarah and Michael would stay with family for a few days, Marcus returned to his chambers to collect research materials. A manila envelope sat on his desk with no postage or marking. Inside were 3 photographs: Marcus entering Elijah's office, Marcus having lunch with Dr. Chen, and Marcus speaking with his former clerk at the Department of Transportation. A note accompanied the photos. "Judges aren't above the law or consequences. Have you ever stood up against a system that seemed determined to silence you? Comment, stand strong if you believe in fighting for justice even when powerful forces try to intimidate you." This story shows how quickly rights can be stripped away when prejudice finds institutional support. Hit that subscribe button if you want to see how Judge Holloway fights back against this conspiracy. Would you have the courage to risk everything to expose corruption? What would you do if you discovered your opponents were monitoring your every move? And most importantly, who else might be willing to stand up and tell the truth about what really happened on that fateful flight? The threatening photos only strengthened Marcus's resolve. If they were watching him this closely, he must be getting close to something important. But what he needed was insider information from the airline itself. He didn't have to wait long. 3 days after filing the discrimination complaint, Marcus received a call from Elijah. "Someone wants to meet with us. Says she has information about your incident but is scared to come forward officially. She'll only talk in person." That afternoon, they met Jasmine Torres, a junior flight attendant who had been working in the main cabin on Marcus's flight. In her late 20s, she fidgeted nervously with her coffee cup in the private conference room Elijah had arranged. "I wasn't going to say anything," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "But when I saw the video they posted, how they edited it, I couldn't stay silent." Jasmine explained that Karen Mitchell had a long history of targeting black passengers, particularly those in premium cabins. "It's this thing she does. She'll question their tickets, double-check their boarding passes, suggest they're in the wrong seat. If they show any hint of frustration, she documents it as aggressive behavior." "Has anyone reported her before?" Marcus asked. "Many times. I've seen at least 5 formal complaints in the last year alone. They all disappear." Jasmine pulled out a USB drive. "I started documenting incidents after the 3rd complaint vanished. Dates, flight numbers, passenger information if I could get it. I also have copies of emails where management dismissed complaints without investigation." The evidence was damning. Not only had Karen engaged in systematic discrimination, but the airline had actively covered it up. One email from a supervisor to HR stated, "Handle the Mitchell situation as usual. We don't need another diversity headache." "This is exactly what we needed," Elijah said. "Jasmine, would you be willing to sign an affidavit about what you've witnessed?" She hesitated. "I'll lose my job." "There are whistleblower protections," Marcus assured her. "We can file for preliminary injunctive relief to prevent retaliation." "My mother depends on my health insurance for her medications," Jasmine explained. "I can't risk a gap in coverage even for a few weeks." Marcus and Elijah exchanged glances. "We'll ensure continuity of coverage," Elijah promised. "And when this is over, if they've retaliated in any way, we'll add that to the lawsuit." After Jasmine left with signed documentation of her legal protections, Marcus and Elijah reviewed the evidence she had provided. It was even more extensive than they had hoped. 15 similar incidents over 2 years, all involving Karen Mitchell, all involving black passengers, all complaints buried. "This isn't just one flight attendant with bias," Marcus said. "This is institutional racism with a cover-up mechanism." The next morning, Marcus's phone rang with an unfamiliar number. The voice on the other end identified himself as Michael Bradford, CEO of Transcontinental Airlines. "Judge Holloway, I'd like to resolve this situation amicably. We take these allegations very seriously, though I'm sure you understand this is just one employee's perspective." "I understand evidence when I see it, Mr. Bradford," Marcus replied, coolly. "Perhaps we could discuss a private settlement. We'd provide appropriate compensation for any discomfort, along with a standard NDA. We value our reputation, as I'm sure you value yours." The implication was clear. Take the money and drop the matter or face escalation. "What I value, Mr. Bradford, is justice and accountability. I'm not interested in being silenced. What I want is an acknowledgement of the discriminatory treatment, disciplinary action for those responsible, and a comprehensive overhaul of your company's approach to bias incidents." The CEO's tone hardened. "That's unfortunate. I was hoping to handle this reasonably. Good day, Judge Holloway." Hours later, Jasmine called Marcus in a panic. "Someone broke into my apartment. My laptop with all the backup documentation is gone, and nothing else was taken. They knew exactly what they were looking for." Marcus immediately called Elijah, who arranged for Jasmine to move to a hotel under a different name. But the next blow came the following morning. Jasmine received an email from Transcontinental HR informing her she was suspended pending investigation for theft of company property and violation of confidentiality agreements. "They're saying, I stole proprietary information," she told Marcus, her voice breaking. "How did they even know? I was so careful." The answer came that afternoon when Elijah's investigator discovered that Jasmine's work email had been remotely accessed the night before the break-in. Someone had monitored her communications, discovered her whistleblowing, and moved quickly to discredit her. "They're always one step ahead," Marcus said in frustration. It's like they know our every move before we make it. Which means someone is feeding them information, Elijah concluded. The question is who? Despite the setback with Jasmine's evidence, Marcus and Elijah decided it was time to take their story public. With Jasmine's permission, they arranged an interview with Jordan Martinez, an investigative reporter from the American Prospect, a progressive news outlet known for exposing corporate malfeasance. In the carefully stage-managed interview, Jasmine appeared with her face blurred and voice altered, describing the pattern of discrimination she had witnessed and the company's systematic efforts to conceal complaints. This isn't about one bad employee, she explained. It's about a corporation that protects discriminatory behavior because addressing it would mean admitting liability for years of similar incidents. The story broke on a Tuesday morning with the headline, "Flight of, Injustice, How an Airline Targeted Black Passengers and Silenced Whistleblowers." It included redacted copies of some of Jasmine's documentation and Marcus's account of his experience. By Wednesday, the story had gained significant traction online. Progressive news outlets picked it up, highlighting the broader implications for racial discrimination in customer service industries. The justice for Judge Holloway began trending on social media, but the response was far from uniformly supportive. Conservative media outlets framed the story very differently. Activist judge uses position to target private business. Judicial overreach. When judges bring personal grievances to the bench. The weaponization of race. How accusations of racism silence legitimate business practices. A prominent right-wing talk show host devoted an entire segment to questioning Marcus's impartiality. If this is how he reacts to not getting special treatment on a flight, how can Americans trust his rulings when white defendants stand before him? The polarized coverage created a dangerous environment for Marcus and his family. Their home address was shared in online forums, forcing them to temporarily relocate to a hotel. Sarah hired private security after receiving threatening phone calls at her workplace. Most disturbing was the impact on their son Michael. After returning to school, he was cornered in the locker room by classmates whose parents watched conservative news. "How does it feel to have a race baiter for a dad?" one boy taunted, before pushing him into the lockers. The situation escalated into a physical confrontation that left Michael with a split lip and bruised ribs. When Marcus and Sarah met with the school principal, they were shocked by her response. "Boys will be boys," she said dismissively. "And frankly, with all the controversy surrounding your family right now, perhaps Michael should consider remote learning until things settle down." "You're punishing our son for being assaulted?" Sarah asked incredulously. "I'm suggesting a practical solution to an unfortunate situation," the principal replied. "We can't monitor every student's response to political disagreements." That evening, the airline released its official statement. Transcontinental Airlines has a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination of any kind. We stand by our employee who has an exemplary 20-year service record. We are concerned that a federal judge would use his position to pursue a personal vendetta against a corporation and its employees based on a misunderstanding. We are cooperating fully with judicial oversight authorities regarding this matter. The reference to judicial oversight authorities was not lost on Marcus. Sure enough, the next morning he received a call from Judge Harrington at the Ethics Committee. "Marcus, things have escalated. There are now additional charges being considered by the committee, including misuse of judicial position for personal gain. Your media campaign has complicated matters significantly." "It's not a media campaign, William. It's the truth. And personal gain. What exactly am I gaining from this nightmare?" "The optics, Marcus. You're leveraging your position to pressure a private company. At least that's how it's being presented to the committee." Marcus realized with growing horror that his efforts to expose the truth were being weaponized against him. The Ethics Committee wasn't just investigating the original incident anymore. They were using his fight for justice as further evidence of supposed misconduct. 2 weeks into the media firestorm, with the Ethics Committee investigation expanding and Jasmine's career in jeopardy, Marcus received a call from an unknown number while working in Elijah's office. "Judge Holloway, my name is William Parker. I was Executive Vice President of Operations at Transcontinental Airlines until I retired 3 years ago. We need to talk, but not over the phone. Can you meet me? 4 hours later, Marcus sat across from Parker in a private room at the back of a small restaurant outside the city. In his 70s, Parker had the sharp eyes and precise manner of someone accustomed to managing complex operations. "I've been watching your situation with great interest, Judge Holloway," Parker began. "What's happening to you isn't new. It's just more visible than usual." Parker explained that during his 15 years in senior management, he had documented a disturbing pattern of discrimination complaints being buried, particularly at the Atlanta hub. "I tried to address it internally, pushing for better training, accountability measures, transparent complaint processes. I was consistently blocked by legal and HR. Too much liability exposure was the standard response." "Why are you coming forward now?" Marcus asked. "Because I've spent 3 years in retirement watching the problem get worse, not better. And because what they're doing to you and that young flight attendant crosses a line even by their standards." Parker produced a small external hard drive. This contains 5 years of internal reports, emails, and HR complaints related to discriminatory incidents. It includes statistical analyses showing that complaints from Black and Hispanic passengers were 78% less likely to receive resolution compared to those from white passengers. Marcus stared at the drive, scarcely believing their luck. "Why didn't you release this when you retired?" "My retirement package included an NDA with severe financial penalties. But seeing what happened to you, and how they're trying to destroy a federal judge who dared to speak up." Parker shook his head. "Some things matter more than money." The evidence was comprehensive and damning. It revealed not just individual incidents of discrimination, but a corporate culture that tacitly encouraged it by protecting employees who engaged in biased behavior while punishing those who reported it. Over the next few days, Parker introduced Marcus and Elijah to other former Transcontinental employees, a former HR manager who had quit after being instructed to lose certain complaints, a training coordinator who was demoted after proposing enhanced diversity education, and 3 former flight attendants who had witnessed Karen Mitchell's behavior firsthand. For the first time since the ordeal began, Marcus felt a surge of hope. With multiple witnesses and documentary evidence spanning years, they could prove not only the discrimination he had experienced, but the systemic nature of the problem and the coordinated cover-up. "We can file a class action," Elijah said excitedly, as they reviewed the growing mountain of evidence. "This goes way beyond your individual case, Marcus. This is about dozens, potentially hundreds of passengers who've been discriminated against." The team worked late into the night, preparing legal documents and organizing evidence. At midnight, Marcus stepped outside Elijah's office to call Sarah with the good news. He had just ended the call when his phone rang again. It was Parker, his voice tight with stress. "They know, Marcus. I don't know how, but they know I've been talking to you." "What happened?" "A courier just delivered a cease and desist letter. They're threatening to sue me for violating my NDA and stealing company property. The letter specifically mentioned the documents I gave you yesterday." "That's impossible," Marcus said. "We've been incredibly careful. No electronic communications, no witnesses to our meetings." "The letter quotes exact phrases from our conversation at the restaurant," Parker continued, his voice shaking. "And it mentions the specific names of the other former employees I connected you with. Marcus, they know everything we've discussed, every single detail." As the implications sank in, Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. Someone very close to their investigation was feeding information directly to Transcontinental Airlines and, possibly, to the Ethics Committee as well. But who? Elijah's firm had implemented strict confidentiality protocols. The former employees had no connection to the current case beyond their testimony. The only people with access to all the information were himself, Elijah, and the realization hit him like a physical blow. There was only one explanation that fit all the facts. Someone had penetrated their inner circle, someone they trusted implicitly. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted completely was working against you? Comment: trust betrayed. If you've experienced the shock of betrayal from someone close to you, This part of Judge Holloway's story shows how corruption can run deeper than we imagine. Hit the like button if you're amazed by Parker's courage to risk everything for justice, and subscribe to find out who's been leaking their confidential information. Who do you think is the traitor in Marcus's inner circle? Could it be someone in Elijah's law firm? One of the former employees with second thoughts? Or someone even closer to the case? And when Marcus discovers the truth, what will he do with this devastating knowledge? The Judicial Ethics Committee hearing was scheduled for a Monday morning in the federal courthouse, a building where Marcus had dispensed justice for 2 decades. Now he entered as the accused, flanked by Elijah and 2 associates from his firm. The hearing room was smaller than a standard courtroom, with a long mahogany table where 7 committee members sat in judgment. Marcus felt a jolt of betrayal when he saw Judge Patricia Reynolds sitting at the center position. Not only was she participating despite their long professional relationship, she was chairing the proceedings. Even more disturbing was the sight of Jeffrey Mitchell sitting at a small desk to the side, ostensibly to take notes but unmistakably present to monitor every word. This preliminary hearing of the Judicial Ethics Committee regarding allegations against Judge Marcus Holloway will now come to order, Patricia announced, her voice devoid of any warmth or recognition of their years as colleagues. The format was immediately hostile. Rather than presenting the specific allegations and allowing Marcus to respond, Patricia opened with a broad statement about patterns of concerning behavior and questions about temperament and impartiality. When Elijah attempted to object to this characterization, Patricia cut him off. "Counselor, this is not a trial. The rules of evidence and procedure do not strictly apply. We are conducting an administrative review." What followed was 3 hours of carefully curated evidence presentation. The viral video was shown repeatedly, with Patricia asking committee members to note the aggressive posture and confrontational tone. Social media posts criticizing the airline were presented as evidence that Marcus had engaged in a public campaign to damage a private corporation using his judicial stature. Most disturbing was the selective presentation of Marcus's judicial record. Cases where he had ruled against white defendants were highlighted with suggestions of bias, while similar rulings against defendants of color were conspicuously absent from the presentation. "Judge Holloway," Patricia said, reading from notes that Jeffrey had just handed her. "In the case of Whitman versus State, you sentenced the defendant to 15 years despite the prosecution recommending 12. The defendant was white. Can you explain this discrepancy?" "That case involved human trafficking of minors," Marcus replied, struggling to maintain his composure. "The defendant had prior convictions that weren't factored into the prosecution's recommendation. Yet in Johnson versus State, you sentenced below the prosecutor's recommendation when the defendant was black," Patricia countered. Johnson was a nonviolent first offender whose case involved extenuating circumstances that were fully documented. "In my written opinion," Marcus explained. Each time he provided context, Patricia would move to a different case, never allowing a complete explanation. The pattern was clear: cherry-picked examples designed to create an impression of bias, without allowing substantive discussion of the actual facts. During a brief recess, Marcus pulled Elijah aside. "This isn't just unfair, it's coordinated character assassination," he whispered. "They've been planning this for months. They must have been reviewing my cases looking for anything they could twist even before the plane incident." "I agree," Elijah said grimly. "But we need to stay focused. Your statement is next, and it may be our only chance to shift the narrative." When the hearing reconvened, Marcus delivered a powerful address about the reality of being a black judge in America, the daily scrutiny and double standards, and the importance of an independent judiciary free from political pressure and bias. "What's happening in this room today is not about one incident on an airplane," he concluded. "It's about whether we, as a judicial system, have the courage to confront discrimination when we see it, even when, especially when, it exists within our own institutions." Several committee members appeared moved, shifting uncomfortably in their seats. For the first time, Marcus felt he might have reached them. Then Patricia called for a 1-hour lunch recess. As Marcus sat in a small consultation room with Elijah, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message contained an audio file, and the text, "Recorded 10 minutes ago in Judge Reynolds' chambers." With trembling fingers, Marcus played the recording. Patricia's voice was unmistakable. "This is taking too long, Jeffrey. We need to wrap this up by end of day." The committee members seemed sympathetic to his statement. Jeffrey Mitchell replied, "It doesn't matter. We have the votes. The decision was made before he walked in the door. Your sister's statement and the airline's full cooperation have been extremely helpful. The director wants this example set. Judges who make trouble need to understand there are consequences. What about the evidence he's gathered? The whistleblowers? Inadmissible in this proceeding. This isn't about facts, Jeffrey. It's about sending a message." The recording ended, leaving Marcus and Elijah staring at each other in stunned silence. "Who sent this?" Elijah whispered. "I don't know," Marcus replied, "but it confirms what we suspected. This was never about justice or ethics. It's about punishment for speaking up. They had the proof of corruption within the very committee, charged with upholding judicial integrity. The question now was how to use it. Armed with the recording of Patricia Reynolds and Jeffrey Mitchell, Marcus and Elijah filed an emergency motion to recuse both from the Ethics Committee proceedings. The motion detailed the conflict of interest, the evidence of predetermination, and the inappropriate coordination with the airline through Jeffrey's family connection. Their hopes were quickly dashed. The following morning, Judge Harrington, Patricia's second-in-command on the committee, issued a one-page ruling. Motion denied. Evidence obtained through unauthorized recording is inadmissible in committee proceedings. "They're not even pretending to follow due process anymore," Marcus said, pacing Elijah's office. "They're using procedural rules to bury evidence of their own misconduct." Outside the courthouse, the situation was escalating in other ways. A group of community activists, legal associations, and civil rights organizations had organized a protest in support of Marcus. Hundreds of people gathered with signs reading, "Justice for Judge Holloway" and "End discrimination in the courts." Just as the protest gained momentum, a counter-demonstration appeared across the street. These protesters carried signs with very different messages: "No activist judges" and "Keep politics out of the courtroom." Several wore shirts with the Judicial Integrity Project logo, the same organization that had first targeted Marcus after the plane incident. Local news crews captured the confrontation between the groups, with police forming a line between them as tensions rose. The coverage painted a picture of a divisive figure who inspired strong reactions on both sides. Exactly the image the committee needed to justify harsh action against him. Meanwhile, Michael Bradford, CEO of Transcontinental Airlines, held a press conference where he expressed concern about organized pressure campaigns targeting private businesses. Without naming Marcus directly, he spoke about powerful individuals who attempt to leverage their positions to intimidate companies and employees who are simply doing their jobs. The coordinated nature of the opposition was becoming clearer. The airline, the Judicial Integrity Project, and members of the Ethics Committee were working in concert to isolate Marcus and frame him as the aggressor rather than the victim. As these events unfolded, Marcus received devastating news from Sarah. Their son Michael had been hospitalized after a more serious attack at school. A group of students had cornered him in a stairwell, shouting racial slurs and references to his father being a disgrace to the bench, before beating him severely enough to cause a concussion and broken ribs. At the hospital, sitting beside his son's bed while he slept, Marcus received a call from a blocked number. "Judge Holloway," said an unidentified male voice. "This has gone far enough. Your family doesn't need to suffer anymore." "Who is this?" Marcus demanded. "Someone in a position to end this nightmare for you. The Ethics Committee is prepared to drop all charges under one condition: your immediate and quiet resignation from the bench. No press statements, no further litigation against the airline, complete silence. In return, your pension remains intact, and this unfortunate chapter ends. And if I refuse, then formal charges will be filed tomorrow. Your pension will be forfeit. Your son's college prospects will vanish with your reputation. And those whistleblowers you've gathered, they'll face their own legal problems. Your choice, Judge, dignity or destruction." The line went dead before Marcus could respond. Looking at his injured son, Marcus felt the weight of the decision crushing him. His principals told him to fight to the end, to expose the corruption, regardless of personal cost. But did he have the right to make his family pay that price? Was his crusade for justice worth destroying their lives? For the first time since the ordeal began, Marcus considered surrender. As Marcus contemplated the ultimatum, weighing his family's safety against his principles, his phone buzzed with an email notification. The sender was anonymous, the subject line simply, "Do not surrender." The message was brief. "You don't know me, but I've been watching what they're doing to you. Check the attachments. Use it wisely. They're monitoring your official email and devices." Attached to the email were several encrypted files. When Marcus opened them, he found a treasure trove of evidence. Unedited security footage from the aircraft showing the entire incident with Karen Mitchell, clearly documenting her discriminatory behavior and vindicating Marcus completely. More damning were internal airline emails discussing how to handle the problem judge. One email from CEO Michael Bradford to the legal department stated, "Find anything we can use to discredit him. This needs to go away before others start making similar claims." Another email mentioned coordinating with our contacts at the Judicial Committee to ensure the ethics investigation reaches the right conclusion. The final attachment was a forensic analysis of the viral video, showing metadata that proved it had been edited on a personal device registered to Jeffrey Mitchell 2 days after the incident. The timing aligned perfectly with when the video first appeared online, directly linking the ethics committee staff member to the smear campaign. Marcus immediately called Elijah, arranging to meet in person to review the materials, wary of potential electronic surveillance. They met at a 24-hour diner far from their usual locations. "This is everything we need," Elijah said, reviewing the files on a secured laptop. "But who sent it? And how did they get access to this level of internal documentation?" The email mentioned cybersecurity, Marcus noted. "My guess is someone in the airline's IT department couldn't stomach what they were seeing." As they analyzed the evidence, Marcus's phone rang again. The caller ID showed unknown, but he answered cautiously. "Judge Holloway? This is Alex Rivera. I'm the one who sent you the files." "How did you get this number?" Marcus asked. "I'm the senior cybersecurity specialist at Transcontinental. Or I was until about 2 hours ago when they figured out I was the leak. They've already reported me to the FBI, claiming I hacked their systems." Rivera's voice was tense but determined. "I had legitimate access to everything I sent you. I've been documenting their illegal activities for months, watching them manipulate evidence, intimidate employees, coordinate with outside groups to target passengers who complain." "Why take this risk for me?" Marcus asked. "Because what they're doing is wrong, and because you're not the only one. There are dozens of cases where they've used the same playbook: discredit, intimidate, silence. Most people can't fight back against a corporation this size with these connections. But you can." Marcus and Elijah spent the night working with Rivera, authenticating the evidence and building a comprehensive file that documented not just the discrimination against Marcus, but the conspiracy to cover it up and weaponize the ethics committee against him. The evidence included metadata showing the edited viral video was created on Jeffrey Mitchell's personal device, logs of communications between airline executives and committee members, and internal airline documentation of their strategy to make an example of Marcus. By dawn, they had compiled an irrefutable case exposing corruption at every level. "We need to move quickly," Elijah advised. "Once we start using this evidence, they'll come after Rivera hard." "I know," Marcus agreed. "But we need to make sure the evidence is secured and widely distributed first. If it only exists in one place, they'll find a way to discredit or suppress it." They created multiple encrypted backups, sending copies to trusted journalists, the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, and the FBI Public Corruption Unit. Each package included Rivera's detailed affidavit explaining how and why he had preserved the evidence. As they finalized their preparations, breaking news alerts began appearing on their phones. Alex Rivera had been arrested at his home on charges of corporate espionage and computer fraud. The airline had moved even faster than they anticipated, working with friendly law enforcement contacts to paint Rivera as a criminal rather than a whistleblower. They're trying to discredit the source before the evidence can be examined, Elijah observed. Marcus stared at Rivera's booking photo on the news site, another person whose life had been upended for daring to stand with him. The weight of responsibility was enormous. We need to move now, he decided. Rivera risked everything to expose the truth. We can't let that sacrifice be in vain. The final ethics committee hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. Marcus had until then to decide whether to use the evidence and potentially put Rivera at even greater risk, or to accept the ultimatum and protect his family and the whistleblowers who had already suffered enough. As dawn broke over the city, Marcus made his decision. The ethics committee hearing room was packed to capacity. News of a potential resolution had leaked, drawing reporters and legal observers eager to witness the fall of Judge Marcus Holloway. Patricia Reynolds called the session to order with barely concealed satisfaction, while Jeffrey Mitchell arranged his materials at the side table, occasionally glancing at his phone. Before we begin the formal proceedings, Patricia announced, I understand Judge Holloway has a statement regarding the allegations against him. Marcus approached the podium, carrying a single manila folder. The room fell silent, anticipating his resignation. Thank you, Judge Reynolds, he began calmly. I do indeed have a statement, though perhaps not the one you're expecting. He opened the folder and removed a USB drive, holding it up for the committee to see. This contains evidence of a coordinated conspiracy involving members of this committee, executives at transcontinental airlines, and outside political groups. The conspiracy aimed to punish me for experiencing racial discrimination and daring to speak about it. Rather than investigating my complaint, the individuals involved fabricated evidence, manipulated the ethics process, and engaged in witness intimidation. Patricia's face drained of color. This is highly inappropriate, Judge Holloway. We're here to address the charges against you, not to entertain baseless accusations. There's nothing baseless about authenticated digital evidence, Judge Reynolds, Marcus replied, his voice steady. Would you like me to play the unedited aircraft security footage showing Karen Mitchell's discriminatory treatment? Or perhaps the recording of you and Mr. Mitchell discussing how the decision against me was predetermined before this hearing began? Or the emails between airline executives and committee members coordinating your strategy? Jeffrey Mitchell stood abruptly. This is outrageous. Any such materials would have been illegally obtained and are inadmissible. The Supreme Court has consistently held that evidence of judicial misconduct cannot be excluded based on how it was obtained when the integrity of the judiciary itself is at stake, Marcus countered. But that's a moot point, as everything I have was legally preserved by whistleblowers with authorized access. Marcus turned to address the full committee. I've already sent complete copies of this evidence to the Department of Justice, the FBI Public Corruption Unit, and select journalists who will publish regardless of what happens in this room today. The truth cannot be buried anymore. He systematically presented the evidence, beginning with the unedited aircraft footage that clearly showed Karen Mitchell's discriminatory behavior and vindicated his account completely. The committee members watched in stunned silence as their carefully constructed narrative collapsed. Next came the forensic analysis proving the viral video had been edited on Jeffrey Mitchell's personal device before being uploaded to an anonymous account linked to the Judicial Integrity Project, an organization that financial records showed had received substantial funding from transcontinental airlines. Most damning were the communications between Patricia Reynolds, Jeffrey Mitchell, and airline executives, revealing their coordinated strategy to use the ethics committee to silence Marcus and discourage other discrimination complaints. Karen Mitchell has a documented history of targeting black passengers, particularly in premium cabins, Marcus explained, displaying statistics compiled by airline whistleblowers. Over the past 3 years, she has questioned the legitimacy of black passengers' first-class tickets at a rate 18 times higher than for white passengers. The airline has buried dozens of complaints about her behavior. As the evidence mounted, several committee members physically distanced themselves from Patricia, recognizing the legal jeopardy her actions had created for everyone involved. I am not the one who should be on trial here, Marcus concluded. The real ethical breach is the weaponization of this committee to punish a judge who experienced discrimination and refused to be silenced. Every person involved in this conspiracy has violated their oath to uphold justice, and equal protection under the law. The room erupted in chaos. 2 committee members immediately called for Patricia and Jeffrey to be recused. Journalists rushed from the room to file breaking stories. Patricia attempted to adjourn the hearing, but the remaining committee members refused to recognize her authority. By that afternoon, the Ethics Committee had unanimously dismissed all charges against Marcus and launched an investigation into Patricia Reynolds and Jeffrey Mitchell. The Department of Justice announced a civil rights investigation into Transcontinental Airlines' discriminatory practices. Karen Mitchell was terminated, along with several executives implicated in the cover-up. In the weeks that followed, more victims of discrimination came forward, emboldened by Marcus's victory. With support from civil rights organizations, Marcus established a legal defense fund to help people facing discrimination in the transportation industry pursue justice. The whistleblowers, Jasmine Torres, William Parker, Alex Rivera, and others who had risked everything, were vindicated. The airline's attempts to prosecute Rivera for exposing their misconduct collapsed under public scrutiny and legal challenges. Jasmine was reinstated with back pay and a promotion to a training position focused on preventing bias incidents. 6 months after the incident that had nearly destroyed his career, Marcus returned to the bench with a new perspective on the justice system he served. The same day, he received a letter from a young black law student who had been following his case. "Your refusal to be silenced showed me that fighting for justice is worth the cost," the student wrote. "I almost gave up on my dream of becoming a judge because I feared the system was too broken to change. You proved that one person with courage can make a difference." As Marcus prepared for a new day in court, he reflected on the price of justice and the battles still to be fought. The system had tried to crush him for speaking truth to power, but in the end, truth had prevailed. Yet he harbored no illusions about the road ahead. For every victory like his, countless others suffered in silence, lacking the resources, evidence, or platform to fight back. The work of creating a truly just society remained unfinished. But today, at least, justice had been served. Judge Marcus Holloway's harrowing journey reminds us that fighting discrimination requires unwavering courage in the face of powerful opposition. His story illustrates how racism often operates not just through individual acts of bias, but through coordinated institutional responses that protect discriminatory practices and silence those who challenge them. The lesson here isn't just about discrimination on an airplane. It's about how systems of power mobilize to protect themselves when threatened. When Marcus dared to speak up about his mistreatment, he faced a sophisticated campaign involving corporate interests, judicial colleagues, and media manipulation, all working together to discredit and destroy him. This story also teaches us about the crucial role of allies and whistleblowers. Without Jasmine Torres, William Parker, Alex Rivera, and others willing to risk their careers and safety, the truth might never have emerged. Their courage reminds us that institutional change requires people on the inside willing to stand for what's right, even at personal cost. Perhaps most importantly, Judge Holloway's experience shows us that documentation and evidence are essential weapons in fighting discrimination. The meticulous gathering of proof, from recordings to metadata to internal communications, ultimately made the difference between defeat and victory. Finally, this story teaches us the importance of persistence. Marcus could have accepted the airline's settlement offer or resigned his position to protect his family. Instead, he recognized that surrendering to injustice only empowers those who perpetuate it. By fighting through to the end, he not only vindicated himself, but created a pathway for others to seek justice. True change happens when people refuse to be silenced, even when the opposition seems overwhelmingly powerful. Call to action. What would you have done in Judge Holloway's position? Would you have continued fighting against a system that seemed determined to destroy you, or would you have protected your family by stepping away? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you believe in standing up against discrimination, no matter how powerful the opposition, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more stories about ordinary people showing extraordinary courage in the fight for justice. And if you know someone who needs inspiration to keep fighting their own battles against discrimination, share this video with them. Remember, when we stand together against injustice, we become impossible to Silence. Thank you for watching, and may you find the courage to speak truth to power in your own life.